Mediterranean fish stew. Hundreds and hundreds of variations of it. No real rules what fish you use. Always a great choice. Great way of using when you have lots of different types of fish kicking around, or you're just you can put anything into this kind of a dish. So what I got here is I've got about 250 grams of mixed fish. What I have now, it doesn't matter what you have. You could use cod. The oily fish, just be a little bit careful with. They tend to dominate a little bit, but the kind of white type fish are the best really with this. So I have some lovely gurnard, I have a little bit of hake, some squid, and I think I have just about one fillet of mackerel just chopped in half there, and I have plenty of mussels. What I have is about 350 gram of nice washed roe mussels. When you tap them, if they're a little bit open like that, give them a close, give them a tap, should close right up. If it doesn't, just discard the mussel. Also what I have is a tin of chickpeas, just to give a little bit of kind of bulk onto the dish and give a little bit of extra protein hit in there. The chickpeas, it's a 400 gram tin. The drained weight comes in at something like 260 grams. It's just easier to use the tins of chickpeas. They're incredibly good value. Great fiber source, great thing to include in your diet very, very regularly. I've also, on the vegetables front here, I have one fennel, which I've just chopped into chunks, kind of generous bite-sized chunks. I have a large red onion, which I just diced. I have about 4 cloves of garlic, which I just roughly chopped up there. I have 350 ml of tomato passata. If you can't get to tomato passata, a can of chopped tomatoes would be just as good. Well, not quite as good, but they'd be perfectly adequate. I have about 150 grams of ripe cherry tomatoes, just cut in half. And then the pre-bought roast red peppers that you can get in oil or in brine, doesn't really matter. The flame roast, grilled or roasted red peppers. And I just have about 150 grams of those. Just to add a little bit of green, and just conveniently using some washed spinach, about 100 grams. And then for herbs and seasonings, I have about 40 grams of coriander. I will be chopping that down. In there as well I have, which I'll also be chopping with that, I have a little bit of basil, about 20 grams, and I have about 5-6 grams of fresh oregano. Again, you can play around with different herbs, fennels, thymes. Thyme is actually a lovely herb with fish. And just play around with different things. There's no, food is, just be confident. You don't have to be too regimental against your recipes either. It's if things go wrong, big deal. It's not the end of the world. But it's 99% of the times nothing really goes wrong. People get a little bit worked up over processes and things like that, and there's nothing to be worried about. Bit of salt just for seasoning, a little bit of black pepper. And for the initial cooking, I have a little bit of olive oil, but again, that's more of a finishing oil. For the cooking and rendering down and cooking my onions, I'm going to use a little bit of coconut oil. It's a bit more heat stable. And from an anti-inflammatory perspective, a much, much better choice. So there's our ingredients. So to cook this dish, what I'm going to do is first put about a teaspoonful of coconut oil into a pan, and about a teaspoonful, and just let that just melt down a little bit. And straight away I'm going to add both my onions and my fennel, because I want to get a nice roasty taste into these. These will take by far the longest to cook. So, onions and fennel into the pan. On a nice high heat, I'm going to add a pinch of salt, a little pinch, and also I'm just going to add a little drop of water just to kind of hurry things along a little bit. Going to pop a lid on that. I'll just let them speed along there nicely. I'm probably going to wait about 2 minutes, just letting those 2 to 3 minutes with the lid on, just to kind of speed them up, then remove the lid and let them cook on a little bit more. And have it waited about 3 minutes. My onions and fennel are starting to just cook down a little bit. But the fennel can be a little bit tough. It's one of those vegetables I like to if you like, overcook almost a little bit. It gets a great flavour, like a superb fish veg, but it does want to be a little bit more tender. It's that's just a personal opinion. So I'm just going to let that cook and render down. I just added a little drop more of water. I'm going to let those cook down a little bit more, soften up a bit before I continue with the dish. And so I'm going to let those cook for a further 3 minutes with the lid on. So after about 3 minutes with the lid on, I'm going to actually just take off the lid because that's more sweating. I'm just going to cook on for a few more minutes, just to let get that nice kind of fried taste. If you ever notice when you're eating the Mediterranean food, this is the important part of making many dishes. And you'll notice they always have that lovely deep flavour. Well, it's at this stage that you develop that flavour. Kind of get that kind of fried kind of taste into the dishes. Next up, I'm going to add my garlic. Plenty of it. I'm using about 4 cloves, although I'd be happy to use more. But I'll try to give a little bit of balance here first. I'm just going to let the garlic sweat in there a little bit and just infuse. You don't want to ever burn your garlic. Again, it gives a very bitter taste if that happens. And next I'm going to add my tomatoes and my peppers. And allow those ingredients just to cook down a little bit more, just to kind of, again, start them up a little bit. Again, the old trick, don't keep adding oil if your pan is a bit dry, and a drop of water. That speeds things along, and you don't end up with this dish that's just overly greasy. I'm going to pop a lid back on that again, just to let the tomatoes soften up, and all the other ingredients kind of infuse in together. And I'm going to leave that lid on for about another 4 minutes. Now, don't just walk away from the pan when I say 3-4 minutes. Do be opening that lid, having a little check, making sure this isn't burning on you. And as you can see, that's just coming to this lovely kind of vegetable base. Now I'm just going to add a little bit of black pepper in there. And I'm going to be very cautious with my salt, because when I'm using salt, the mussels are commonly contain quite a lot of water, and that is seawater. So when you add them in, the mussels themselves, most times, if they're good fresh mussels, will take care of the seasoning themselves. Next thing I'm going to add, my beans. Just allow them to warm themselves through. So this nice vegetable bean. We can have a wee taste that, see if seasoning is about right. Yeah, just lightly seasoned, because again we're using mussels, they have to be a little bit careful. I'm going to pop the lid back on that for a second, just to get it up to temperature. And now I'm going to add my passata. I'm going to rinse the bowl I had the passata. A drop of water. And just allow that to come to a nice simmer. If it's a little bit on the thick side, don't worry. You can always tin it down, but again, I'm just conscious that I am using mussels, and again, they can have quite a lot of liquid in them, and that tends to tin down just kind of a sauce quite a lot. Anyway, so as you can see, this is just coming up to a simmer. I'm just going to speed it up for a couple of seconds, just with a lid. And as you can see, the whole thing is just at a nice simmer now. And at this point, I'm going to add all of my fish and seafood together. Now, the thing with the fish is, you only can really stir it and mix it about when it's raw, because You don't want all of this fish to break up on you. So stir it around well into your sauce now. Sometimes the little tongs is a good way of just separating it out, because when the fish actually cooks, obviously it's going to be much trickier to manage. So kind of arrange it, get your pieces of squid, mussels, get everything distributed around it nicely, and just be stirring it nice gentle pace there as it's starting to heat through. And the beans there, or I should say the chickpeas, which again are bringing lovely bulk into the dish. And now what I'm just going to do is, now if you do think it's a little bit thick, I think this might be a little bit on the thick side there, you can see yourself. I'm just going to add a little drop of water. Don't swamp it, but just enough to lighten it out, so it doesn't get a chance to risk it burning. So, that's how we should look now. Just looking lovely and tasty. And now I'm just going to I'm going to reduce the heat down to a lower heat. Put it on the lowest heat. Once it comes to a simmer and you're watching it, then put it onto the lowest heat that you have. Keeping an eye on it. Lid on. And we'll just let that cook away. Just give my little wipe. And I'm just going to let that cook away until the fish is cooked. That could take up around 10 minutes thereabouts. Keep an eye on it as it's cooking. I'll just show you what to do. Just lift it up very gently. Just make sure it's not sticking on the bottom. And if it's not quite getting to a simmer, just bring it back up to a simmer, just controlling your heat very, very precisely if you like. When it's up to a nice simmer, and you want to just a low simmer, just enough heat to allow that fish to cook through. Probably take in around 10 minutes. So lid on it, but do keep an eye on it as it's cooking. So having waited actually about 7-8 minutes here, I was just checking this, and as you can see, it's just cooking nicely. All the mussels have opened now, and that fish is almost cooked. So at this stage, I'm going to just generally plop in my spinach. At the same time, I'm going to go a little drizzle of olive oil. I'm going to use about 20 ml, just to kind of give it that nice little texture onto it. And as I said, oil is more of a finishing product, olive oil. And then when you're cooking, tend to go with the coconut oils. I'm just going to cover that in the lid. And now I'm going to let it simmer for just a couple of seconds, about say 15 seconds with the lid on. As you can see, let a little bit of steam build up inside it. And after about 15 seconds, I'm going to completely turn off the heat. And I'm just going to let that stand, using the residual heat that's in the pan to let this finish. So don't take the lid off whatever you do, and let the dish just stand there for about 5 minutes. And as we're waiting, all of those flavors, the fish is going to continue cooking. It's going to cook perfectly, and all the flavors are just going to infuse nicely. Now, having waited about 5 minutes, I'm just going to remove the lid. And as you can see, all that spinach has just cooked and wilted, and very, very gently kind of mix the spinach in among the fish. Just being careful and conscious not to disturb the fish too much, because you don't want to break, you want chunks of fish in this. Finally, if you remember those herbs, the coriander, the basil, the little bit of oregano that I had, I'm going to put all of those nice chopped veg or herbs over the dish at the very last second. I had checked the seasoning myself, and I'm going to just put a little pinch more salt, pinch more pepper into this, and then I'm going to put the lid back on it one last time, and bring the whole thing up to a simmer just to allow those herbs to infuse in through the dish. But literally just a very, very small little blast of heat. They literally need 10 seconds. Literally, that should do it. There we go. Just to kind of get that little last piece of temperature into the dish and just allow everything to fuse there together. I'm just going to have a little taste. Yeah. And there we go. Our lovely little seafood stew. And it actually will go quite some way as well. Other spices that will work a treat in this is a little bit of star anise. Unfortunately, I didn't have any with me today, but but that would give a lovely little texture in there as well. Beautiful. Now to serve this dish, I'm going to turn off the heat, and I'm just going to get a nice appropriate sized bowl. And you could either spoon or very, very carefully, knowing that your bowl is the right size. No, just very carefully spoon our seafood stew into the bowl, allowing, and just being very, very conscious not to break up the fish, and just allowing persons then to take the fish and eat exactly what they'd like to eat. And then we have those nice beans or chickpeas going on top, and there we have it. Just put a few little greens on top there, and there is a lovely Mediterranean style fish stew. I just kept back a couple of sprigs of the oregano, and I'm just going to, and it doesn't matter if you had a little bit of parsley, a bit of fennel. Again, no real rules in the herbs in this. I'm going to go give a last little blast of some black pepper over the top. It's perfectly seasoned anyhow with the mussels. I'm just going to give a drizzle of olive oil. And there we have it. A lovely Mediterranean fish stew.